Hi, good afternoon, Project Impact Scholars. I'm really excited you're joining us today for a video on overcoming test anxiety, learning how to identify it, what anxiety is in general, and how you can leverage these tips from these amazing Malcolm X staff members who work in the tutoring center to really master your class this semester and beyond. So I'm going to ask the two to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with a little conversation about anxiety. Laurel, do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Laurel Folia. I'm a tutor at Malcolm X College in the Academic Support Center. I work with all of the English classes, all of the English acquisition classes. I'm available to students in all of those classes. Study skills, tutoring, and GED, and general high school ed.
Excellent. Hey, Charles.
Hey, how are you? I'm Charles. I'm also a tutor. I tutor social science, psychology. I'm also an adjunct, so I teach general psychology, intro, development through the lifespan, social science, and a few other courses as well.
Fantastic. I'm so glad that you guys took some time out of your schedule to be with us today over spring break. Laurel looks like you might already be there.
Not real.
So can you guys tell us a little bit, like, what is anxiety?
Charles, you want to take this one to start?
Well, anxiety itself is a psychological condition in which individuals have extreme distress or panic because of the fear of the unknown.
And that's certainly a place where we're kind of feeling.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Right. So feeling anxiety right now is absolutely okay.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think actually what I talk to students a lot about is anxiety. It's not inherently bad.
No, not at all.
Anxiety is an emotion, and all emotions serve a purpose. We don't want to get rid of emotions because they all serve a purpose, but we want to make sure that they are at the right level, at the right situation.
Exactly.
So go ahead, Charles.
Anxiety in small doses actually keeps us alive because it lets us know that there's a change in the environment. It's just when it becomes extreme, that's when it becomes dysfunctional.
Right. Like anxiety, we should be thankful sometimes when we feel anxiety because it keeps us safe. That's its purpose. If we didn't have anxiety, we would just cross the road without looking both ways. But a little bit of anxiety keeps us on our toes.
Oh, thanks, guys. That's really good to know. Sometimes anxiety has this like bad reputation, right? Great. So that's what anxiety is, but what does it feel like? Like, what does it feel like in my head? What does it feel like in my body when I'm actually experiencing anxiety?
That's a good question. Want me to go, Laura?
Sure. Yeah. You start.
Well, physically, anxiety can cause sweating, shaking, rapid heartbeat. Individuals can experience dry mouth. In extreme cases, they can faint. They can experience nausea. In a milder sense, they tend to experience butterflies in the stomach. That's milder. Cognitively, you can see individuals, they start to fidget. They may avoid situations altogether, and then they have difficulty concentrating.
Yeah, I would add only to those, breathing patterns can change. You can sometimes, if you're experiencing anxiety, you can be breathing more shallowly. Your heart rate can increase. Some people can experience even gastrointestinal distress if they're feeling really anxious. And all of those, if we think back to, and probably we'll keep coming back to this, the purpose of anxiety, all of those make sense because if we are faced with a threat or a change in our environment, we go into our fight or flight or freeze mode, in which all of the blood rushes to our limbs so we can run away or fight back, or our pupils dilate. And so we literally are depriving our brains of the blood that it needs and the oxygen that it needs to think. So the physiological response makes total sense, but it doesn't fit with the actual situation. It's not useful because we're not actually being threatened by an exam. We're not being threatened physically by an exam.
So yeah, let's pivot, to what like actual test taking anxiety is. And like, I'm sure it has similar responses,
Hmm.
physically, emotionally. But what are the causes? If we're not, a test isn't running after me in the dark. I'm not, I don't have to do fight or flight, but I'm having similar responses. Why is that?
So part of what a response to anxiety can involve is rumination and repetitive thinking. And that thinking can reinforce that physical response. And the thinking often focuses on a fear of some kind. So a fear of a danger or a perceived threat. And we get very good at what we do a lot. So if we get very used to feeling anxious when we think about being in school or taking a test, we really strengthen those response pathways. And so that becomes our natural response to thinking that I have a test. Okay, my body's going to react this way. So stress is our natural response to any kind of demand being placed on us. And a test is a demand. School, it places demands on us. Life places demands on us, and that's not going to stop. But what we can have control over is how we respond reasonably to those demands and to those stresses.
Do you want to? Yeah, go ahead, Charles. What were you gonna add?
Did you say what was the causes of test anxiety?
Yeah. I mean, what causes us to like freak out when we have an exam?
Mostly it is preparation. Many students feel that they're not prepared. They think that they're going to fail, or they have a history of failing. And the moment they look at a test, they automatically connect the present to the past, and it causes that fear to kick in. So yeah, that sometime in a small amount, that fear can be good, but when it's excessive, it can cause a person to have maladaptive behaviors.
Yeah, I think preparation is a big thing. So negative self-talk. So constantly repeating to yourself, I can't do this, I'm not prepared, I don't know how to do this, or I'm going to fail. That's kind of negative self-talk. Procrastination. So not doing the work that you know you have to do, that creates this cycle of then building more tension, and the tension itself gets in the way of doing the work, and then the cycle continues. And lack of preparation in three areas: in the actual content that you're going to be evaluated on, the structure of the exam, so being prepared in that you understand what kinds of questions you're going to be asked and how you're going to be evaluated, and then preparation in the form of learning how to manage and prevent excessive stress, which it's a skill, and like any skill, it has to be practiced along with the whole process of your studies, so that you don't just expect yourself to show up at a test and be able to manage that anxiety the first time. It takes practice.
As it relates to being prepared, I think that you can be unprepared, as you stated, Ms. Laura. You can be unprepared. You can be overprepared, where you studied, maybe studied the night before and you stayed up late, or you studied more material than what you actually needed to study. Say maybe the test is on chapter 3, but you studied chapters 1, 2, and 3. So you can actually be overprepared. Many times you can be unorganized as it relates to how you take notes, the way that you study, the place that you study in, and then overthinking. And I find that a lot, especially with my students. When I get their exams back, sometimes they'll change the right answer for the wrong answer. So I'll ask, like, why did you do that? And they'll say, well, I thought you were trying to trick me, or I thought that, right. So a lot of times you're overthinking, which causes you to doubt yourself. And then when you connect that overthinking and being unprepared to poor performance, it causes you to have anxiety, especially if the first thing you say is, I'm going to fail. And I have so many students before I give the test, they already start to panic, like, I'm gonna fail. But that's not always the case.
Yeah.
I'm really seeing like it's a cycle like that has to be broken. And Laurel, you were saying like it takes practice, like negative self-talk is so strong, like being saying like I'm going to fail whether and actually believing it, right, really induces all of these kind of like symptoms of anxiety that you're talking about, and can actually affect test performance. So what tips do you guys have to like break this cycle?
Charles?
Oh, you can go.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I want to add is that sometimes, a quick note, that sometimes I have students tell me, well, I need a little bit of pressure. I do well under pressure. I do better under pressure.
Right.
And I say, maybe so. Maybe you need a little bit of extra stress to motivate you to study. But if you think about this, a little example of trying to remember a name that you've just forgotten, too much stress does inhibit your performance. So let's say somebody's walking towards you on the street and you recognize them, but you can't remember their name, and they're getting closer and closer, and you're trying to remember their name and you really can't. And then it's an awkward situation and you have never remembered their name. And then maybe like later in the day, you're relaxed and it just comes to you. That's a perfect example of how heightened stress actually inhibits our brain's ability to function. So what we want to do is not get rid of anxiety altogether, but we want to keep it at a level that's going to optimize our performance. So the first thing that I have students do is understand what anxiety is. I think that's a really important step in gaining control of it. And understanding what it is allows you to recognize when it arises, acknowledge it, and then redirect. But if you just tell yourself that you're going to get rid of anxiety, emotions really love themselves and they're going to keep coming back. And so recognizing, acknowledging, and redirecting is our first step. I have many more, but I'll let Charles jump in if you have any additional thoughts here.
One thing that anxiety itself is a psychological state, and it's the psychological state that creates the emotion. So once you put yourself in that psychological state of being, of panicking, that person then does not perform well, because it literally is counterproductive to the way we think. It automatically stops us from focusing on many things just to stay alive, quote unquote, which is what the stress is doing. I will block out everything that I think is unnecessary to focus on the actual threat. And that causes me now to forget what I studied. It causes me now to forget, I know this. But because I'm panicking, the brain is saying, let's just focus on the here and now and not what I added to, the mental state.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially for combating negative self-talk. And and when you acknowledge the anxiety that's generating the negative self-talk, and that will keep that cycle going, students I have some students do this out loud with me. They actually practice saying, thank you very much. Thank you, thought. Thank you, brain, for showing me that I am capable of this emotion. This is normal and healthy, but it's not really helpful right now. So I'm going to put you aside and I'm going to focus on the bigger picture, all the things that I need to look at, rather than this threat that's not actually a danger.
So is that like the acknowledgement and redirect that you're talking about? Like actually, literally saying it out loud if you have to?
Absolutely. Yes. That's for focusing on the negative self-talk in particular. Thank you very much. You're not helpful right now.
Mm-hmm.
For procrastination as a cause, making a schedule is super important. And especially for students who have so many obligations and so many responsibilities. And making a reasonable, realistic schedule is a skill like anything else that needs to be practiced. And that's one of the things that we can do in study skills sessions, or even if we're in any kind of session as a tutor and a student brings up this idea of time management challenges, we sit down and we make a schedule and we look at all of the things the student has to do and all of the hours that should be expected that they spend on studying, and we find places for them in the week. And just that process of preparation immediately relieves some tension, because it relieves a sense of uncertainty about when this studying is going to happen. And we started this conversation by talking about, when Charles was mentioning fear of the unknown, that can extend to, if I don't know how my week is going to play out, that can heighten my anxiety level. But if I make a good schedule, and even if I have help making it, which I love to do this for other people, make their schedules, it can be extremely useful, a useful step in reducing anxiety.
That's great. So what other things can I do to ease my anxiety?
So, Charles, I'm going to jump in, but feel free to cut me off. Actually, you go first.
Well, test anxiety is a part of anxiety. We know that for sure. It's just another form of anxiety. Anxiety itself can lead to panic. And I don't think what a lot of people don't understand is test anxiety is performance anxiety. So this person believes that I need to perform, and many times just thinking that I have to perform causes a person to panic. So I say that the same thing that we use to regulate anxiety, we could use to regulate test anxiety. So we tell the person to one, breathe. That's the first thing that you do is take a deep breath. Then you center, focus, and be in the moment. Because whenever I'm panicking, I'm not in that place. I'm not in that moment. I'm in worry or I'm in the past, thinking about what happened the last time. So once the student breathes, tell them take a deep breath, focus and center on where they are. They can see where now, once they start to calm down, the memory kicks in. So now they're better at believing in self, because the moment they start panicking, they stop believing in self. That causes the majority of the problem.
That's really interesting. I also suffer from test anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that's helped me is actually like envisioning myself taking the test and doing well, like building a really clear mental picture.
Exactly.
Like, what room am I in? What pencil am I holding? You know, who's around me? What's the temperature? What's the smell
Mm-hmm.
of the space? And having like a sensory experience of success was really important to me battling test anxiety.
Exactly. And I agree. I too have had test anxiety for all of my life. I've literally all of my life. And I had to learn how to get past that. And the one thing that I've always told myself, well, I learned to tell myself, is it's only one test.
Yep.
This test is not the end of the world. It's not going to make a break. It's only one test. And if I can get past this, or I tell myself, I passed the last one. If I can do the last one, I can do this one. So it's that positive reaffirmation of self, letting you know that I got this. I like what Laura said. Sometimes you literally have to say it out loud. I got this. I know this. I can do this. And then you can kind of see yourself calm down.
Absolutely. I love that. Laurel, do
Yeah.
you add?
Yeah, I think I love what you said about visualizing your space, because I think the third part of my main approaches to easing anxiety is about preparation, and visualization is a kind of preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And the more prepared we feel, and the more confident we feel in ourselves, and the more confident, the lower our stress. So I love also Charles talking about breathing and centering, because a lot of students think that they start to feel anxious and the solution is they need to study harder or they need to work harder.
Right.
And that there's literally no physical way that they're going to be able to do that if their anxiety levels stay high.
Mm-hmm.
So part of this is identifying the order of operations. Like the first step is to identify that you're feeling anxious. The second step is to deal with the anxiety itself. And then, only then, can you move forward and study better with study strategies that we can talk about in tutoring sessions, or some of them that we can talk about now. So breathing, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
There are some actual breathing structures that people can follow, like 3 counts in, hold for 3, 3 counts out, 3 more counts. And you do that about 7 times. Any kind of breathing that to reduce your stress or to lower your blood pressure has a longer exhale than inhale. So even if you only remember do long exhales, that will lower your blood pressure. I think preparation, it has 3 parts: preparing the material itself, preparing the structure of understanding the structure of the exam, and learning how to manage anxiety. So preparing for the exam is learning how to study more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And Charles, I know, has been using the Cornell method with his students, which is a method of note-taking and of studying that there's probably a link we can share for the Cornell method. That's a way of organizing your notes so that your studying actually begins the first day of the semester. It's not something you leave until the end of the semester. Establishing a routine the day of your test is really important, even if you're taking it at home, because our brains really respond well to routine and habit. So just like you were saying, visualizing what you're going to eat in the morning and what you're going to do right before, and the pencil you're going to use, or that kind of thing can help you get into the right mindset.
I love
I
that.
had one thing that
Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to say now.
Well, I wanted to ask, like, students are taking classes remotely now. So can you guys, I mean, and Charles, as an instructor, you're having experiences with students in the classroom remotely right now. Charles, would you mind providing just some tips on success for students as they, study remotely, take tests, whether they're suffering from anxiety or not? I mean, I think these are tough times, and this structure is different from what our students signed up for.
Exactly.
So there's an adjustment period. So do you have any pro tips to share?
I think one of the major things is to know your learning style. I know there's arguments against this, but everyone has a learning style. Some people are visual, some people are hands-on. If you know your learning style and then you take to that strength, you can grasp the knowledge much better. The note-taking, as she said, is very, very important. And then what a lot of people tend to do is like study the night before. I say this, don't study the night before. The night before, you need to get a good night's rest, maybe relax a little bit, because that way the brain is focusing on information subconsciously. So when you're ready for the test, it'll move it from the subconscious to the conscious mind. So you can be overloaded by trying to cram before. Never, never, ever cram. That's a recipe for disaster. The moment you try to cram, that's actually telling the brain not to focus. It's telling the brain not to remember. So the note-taking is very important because it's going to enhance the learning. So it tells the brain that this is important. So remember this. That is very, very important. And then color code. If you can color code, like when we're talking about psychology, what are the theories? What are the theorists? And then what are the examples of that theory? If you put those in 3 different color codes, when you are taking the test, you'll visually see that. So if I say Sigmund Freud is blue, what else is blue? If I say, Albert Watson is yellow, what else is yellow? That tends to help a lot.
That's awesome. Those are really great tips. I feel like we're kind of at the 20-minute mark. I want to be respectful of your time and our viewers. So if students want to come chat with you guys and kind of have a one-on-one session, maybe I need Laurel to build my schedule, or I want to talk to Charles more about this color coding thing, because I'm definitely that kind of thinker. Right. What would I do? How would I do that?
So you can sign up for tutoring on Grades First. Go to sign into your regular Grades First page, and on the upper right-hand corner will be a button that says Get Tutoring, or Orientation, I think is also on the button. Get Tutoring, you click that and you answer all the prompts for location, and if there's a particular tutor you want to work with, there's a drop-down menu where you can select the subject area, and then you can select a time. And the tutor will reach out to you to schedule a Zoom meeting for this time when we are going distant learning. So then you can have a face-to-face meeting at a scheduled time, one-on-one, for about 50 minutes to an hour.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, great. I'm so grateful for your time today. Do you guys have any burning desires? Want to express anything else before we call it?
One thing, never be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
That is the major, major thing. Never be afraid to reach out and then use your resources. Especially now, we need to use all our resources that we can. So reach out, ask for help, talk to the professor. I tell my students all the time, reach out to me. If I don't get back to you, within an hour, I will get back to you before the day is out. So ask for help, tutoring, counseling, the wellness center. There's many avenues that we can go through now. And we all need help now.
We do. Yes. Well,
Absolutely.
I'm grateful for you guys. Laurel, put on your sunscreen. It looks really sunny out there.